What's up again? I'm Chris Beach, and this is Evansville High School football. 100 years, millions of memories. Now, for the past several years, the Memorial Tigers have become a consistent top program in the SIAC, and they made their mark in Indianapolis with not one, not two, but 3 straight trips to Lucas Oil Stadium, resulting in 2 state titles. Well, joining me today is the head coach for Memorial football. Please welcome Coach John Hurley. Coach, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
No, glad to do it. Good to talk with you.
Well, you know, Coach, you yourself, you had a lot of success during your playing days at Memorial. In 1988, you were the captain of an undefeated Tigers team. They made it all the way to semi-state. Just tell me a little bit about that season.
Well, we had 3 captains. Brian Holt, Brian Mitchell were also captains. And, we ended up finishing the season at 13-1, got beat double overtime 3-0 at Central Stadium in a pretty heavy downpour. We had probably one of the better players that have come out of the stadium, at that time anyway. Ken Mills Jr., he was a tremendous running back for us. I think he ended up being like second in the state rushing. And it's kind of funny to go back and look at stats and things from back then. It was different across the board. I think Mater Dei threw the ball probably the most, but they didn't throw it very much back then. I don't even know if we had 100 attempts on the whole year back then as far as throwing the football. But it's kind of neat to go back and look and make some comparisons. You still see some of the teams in the tournament today that we ran into, 30 plus years ago.
Oh, I bet. And let's fast forward several years. You took over the head coaching job for the Tigers in 2007. So how'd you end up getting that job at your alma mater?
Well, it was 2008 was my first year. I don't know when I actually was named the head coach, but the first season I was head coach, 2008. Jerry Adams was the principal, and Coach Mattingly was stepping down, and they made it an easy transition back then. I know we went in and had a couple conversations, and it was more or less a transition at that point in time. And Coach Mattingly is probably one of the best things that happened to me in my coaching career, as far as being able to learn how to work with people, because Coach Mattingly is tremendous at working with people. That was a big deal for me at that time.
Well, in back-to-back seasons, the Tigers made it all the way to the Class 3A state title game. Just talk about those 2 seasons in general back in, I believe it was 2007, 2008.
2008 season was our first year. We played Belmont, and we made too many critical errors. I think we ended up losing the game 28-14, somewhere along that line. But we were pretty young that year as well. So we were fortunate to come back in 2009. And that year when we played, I think about this now. I should remember this.
I believe it was West Lafayette.
But man, we ran into a buzzsaw.
Yeah.
With them, and they had a quarterback. I remember early in the game we had a pretty good linebacker, Mike Wilson. I mean, I felt like he stroked their quarterback on the sideline pretty good. That guy bounced up like nothing had happened to him, and I thought, holy cow. But we were really fortunate to really have a good group of young men those 2 years. Not too many people were fortunate enough to start off with 2 really strong teams like that in their coaching career.
Oh, yeah, definitely a great start to your tenure as the head coach at Memorial. Now, let's fast forward a couple more years. As I mentioned, 2017, 2019, you led Memorial to 3 state championship games. The Tigers won the 3A title in 2017, made it back in 2018 as state runner-ups, and then the following year, you guys got bumped up to Class 4A. Well, what'd you do? You went back to Lucas Oil Stadium, and you won the 4A state title that year. I mean, how were you guys able to create such an amazing feat those 3 seasons?
Well, it started with, again, I felt like, our first run in 2017 was really set up by the seniors in 2016. We were beating the regional that year. And I could see coming up in our feeder system that we had a good group of young men coming. I felt like, if everybody stays healthy, we'd have a pretty good shot at making a nice little run at that time. I felt like 2016 would probably be where the run would start, and then 2019 would be tough. But then 2016, we got a little banged up in the tournament, lost to a really strong Brownstown Central team, and then we came back in 17 and really put things together. You know, Michael Lindauer and Branson Combs and Brock Combs and Max Goodwin and Drew Hart and Kenyon Irvin. I mean, we just had a tremendous group of young men, and we were fortunate enough to go through and beat Brebeuf in the state finals. It was a tremendous feeling. As a lot of people wasn't too sure we'd ever have the ability coming out of the South to be able to do something like that. And then to go back again in 18 after graduating all those guys, we still had Lindauer and the two Combs boys, but just a lot of people started filling in. The one thing that happened to us, I felt like in 18, we had an injury in the sectionals against Vincennes where we lost one of our defensive backs in Miguel Turnbull, and I thought that was something that really hurt us as we went through the tournament. And we ended up losing a barn burner. I know it was 48 to 46 or something like that in the finals. And then, of course, in 19 was the year where we got bumped up. 19's the year probably we shouldn't have been as competitive as we were. We wouldn't impress anybody walking out on the field. And I'm sure our lifting numbers, I think our best bench was by one of our wideouts. But I'd say it was probably one of the most competitive teams. I mean, it didn't matter what we were doing, they were competing. And to go up there and get a nice victory over, at the time, a 14-0 East Noble team was a tremendous feeling. And for me, it's pretty fortunate because my youngest son was on all three of those teams, so that's kind of special as a parent as well.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. You had a lot of talent to work with over those few years. I mean, let me just throw out some names that you've had the opportunity to coach. Michael Lindauer, Grant Gibbons, Branson Combs, Brock Combs, Colton Pence. I mean, just to name a few, that's a lot of great talent. I mean, what's it like to coach so many talented players?
Well, I think most coaches would agree. It makes you look a lot better when you have guys like that. And I'm sure a lot of guys around town were ready for all those guys to move on. And, there's guys that and those guys that were all named are pretty much the guys, they're skill guys. But we've had some tremendous linemen come through in that time period too. And I think that's what really put us over the top, And we've had great players on years that we weren't very good either. They just didn't have the supporting cast that those guys tended to have. But, it's one of those things. I can remember, when Grant Gibbons was quarterback, and he did a great job for us, tremendous athlete. But I think the best thing he just competed. I can remember watching him in Lifetime Sports or a PE class as a kid. Or I remember, like, freshman year playing basketball, they used to do a make it, take it game. And I think to this day, he holds the record for the most make it and take it's just because, he's just flying around. And even when we have an alumni football game, usually on our first, varsity scrimmage, you let the alumni get out there and throw around a 7-on-7 game. The first couple of years, that Grant came back and played on, he's diving all over the place and laying out. So, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, you get guys that really know how to compete. And obviously, Michael and Grant are probably fresher in people's minds from the standpoint of the success that they had. And, Brock, that his senior year in 2019, we finally let him play a little bit of offense. I mean, he pretty well carried us through the tournament for the most part. But you can't say enough about those guys and what they do, not only for the football team, but what they did for Memorial High School and really football in the South.
Well, and as I said, Memorial has been at the top of the SIC, which is, by the way, one of the most brutal conferences in all of Indiana. And, Memorial and I would say Central the last couple of years have probably been the most consistent, staying towards the top of the league. Mater Dei and Castle have had really good teams too. But how have you been able to build such a consistent winning tradition, especially in just such a difficult conference? It's,
one of the things this conference, and I've always said this, and I believed it when I was an assistant coach. I still stand by as a head coach. You got to use this conference to prepare you for the tournament. And if you can survive through the conference, you're going to have a shot in the tournament. If you can win the conference, you're going to be probably the toughest out in the tournament. And that holds through pretty well. And we'll be pretty strongly represented 2, 3, 4, and 5A. And, obviously, we're going to beat ourselves up in the 4A sectional. But we've been really fortunate, last year with Mater Dei, Castle making a nice run, and Central going up through the regional. I mean, I think it represents itself every year. And I think, you know, when you get down here in the southern part of the state, a lot of times people forget about us a little bit until the tournament starts. And you'll notice it, you know, I think Gibson Southern probably has the best representation from the standpoint of, you know, rankings throughout, you know, year in and year out. But, you know, you start getting into 4A and 5A, and down here sometimes we kind of get forgot about a little bit.
Well, one more question I want to ask you, Coach, as we get ready for this season. Last year was a crazy year for everybody, including high school football teams with COVID-19. Obviously, a lot of teams, you know, they didn't get to prepare all the summer workouts as they typically do. So how do you feel this season will be compared to last year?
I think we've done a better job this summer of preparing ourselves. And, you know, we're not as, we didn't do as much as we've done in the past as far as competing with other schools. And part of that's on me because wasn't too sure, you know, what kind of protocols we're going to have to put in place. We had a couple things lined up with a couple schools out in Indianapolis that fell through at the last minute. But I feel good about, you know, our preparation going in this year. And we've got a little bit more experience. So, you know, last year I really felt like we were really going back to basics and trying to get things going, but trying to do that without having contact and trying to keep it in small groups. It just really complicated things. But this year you have a little bit more freedom from that standpoint.
Well, Coach, hopefully this will be a more normal season under the Friday Night Lights. I wish your team luck this season. Good luck to all the teams this year as we get ready for another exciting year of Indiana high school football. Coach, thank you for taking the time for joining with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
It's always exciting to get this season going again, I tell you.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Thank you. Coach John Hurley, head coach of the Memorial Tigers. Remember to follow us on tristatehomepage.com as we continue to celebrate Evansville high school football. 100 years, millions of memories. I'm Chris Beach. We'll see you on the next drive.